Welcome to Guided by Third Wheel, the podcast. My name is Amber Ireland, and I'm here with my co-host, Jill Bucaro. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Guided by Third Wheel. Today, Amber and I could not figure out what to talk about, so we have these cool cards, and we've talked about the cards before. They're called Tales, T-A-L-E-S. And I think they're cards to like maybe facilitate conversation among family, or if you're interviewing somebody, maybe do it back and forth with your partner or your friends or something like that. But we have these for this exact moment when we do not know what to talk about. So we pulled a Tales card. We let the universe decide. We actually pulled two, but the first one was, what is a dream that you've let go of? It's a little heavy for a Sunday morning, which is when we're recording this. But what is a dream you've let go of? Amber, you go first.
So we're going to go like real big picture instead of real specific. A dream that I've let go of that I think I held for a very long time was the dream of perfection. The dream that everything, not that what I wanted necessarily, but like the specificity of it, the marriage, the kids, the house, all of these pieces and how life should line up for me. I've had to let go of that because it's just not realistic that it's going to happen in the way that maybe society prescribed or the way that I've seen it from other people. And I do think that that was a dream. It was just kind of like, this is what I want. And in letting go of that, I think I've been able to get down to really what the feeling of that was. And the feeling of that was to be connected, just general freedom in my life, to not have to worry so much and be able to do what I want to do and to be authentic in my true self. And so getting down into those feelings really has helped me to let go of all of that like very specific stuff.
Like outer stuff. Right.
That was pretty much holding me back from having those feelings and being able to like really ground into what I actually did want. So I think, the biggest piece for me is letting go of dreams that now I realize were never going to be fulfilling to me. Like I could fulfill them if I wanted to.
Right.
I could have all of those things, but to what end?
Yes. No, absolutely. I was thinking the same thing because I was like, man, I feel like the dream I've let go of is perfectionism. But then I was thinking when you were talking, it's like, did I want to be quote unquote perfect, right? Like, did I want to have this like nice linear life because I wanted it? Like, did I want to be perfect or did I want people to view me as perfect? And I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I wanted people to look at me and be like, oh man, like Jill's really got it all together. Like she did it right. You know what I mean? Like she hit those milestones. She is killing it, whether in her career, in the mom game, look at her beautiful house, right? And I think that was always the dream. And it's like, it wasn't even my dream. It was like rooted in this weird self-esteem kind of like I needed that external validation. And, and I'm a pretty smart, perceptive lady, right? And I look around and I'm like, oh, those are the type of people that get the most external validation, right? So let me do that.
Yeah.
Not because I want to, but because that's what everybody seems to think that we should all be doing.
I agree. And I think for me, I thought that was going to make life easier.
Yes.
If I had all of that external validation, if everybody looked at me as being what they expected.
Yes.
Particularly my family and my friends, like if I was as expected, then my life would be easier because I wouldn't have conflict, right?
Right.
Me bending myself into what they wanted would reduce the amount of conflict that I would have in my life.
Right.
And truly, it's exactly the opposite. So I had to let go of that and say like, okay, with what I want is ease, right?
Yes.
I have to flip this. And I have to create my own ease instead of doing what other people want and then expecting my life to flow with ease because they are having that external validation.
Exactly. I used to be at a point in my life, I can remember like this really specific like moment when I was a teenager. And I truly forget like the entire context of the situation, but I had a free evening, right? Like on a weekend. And like all I wanted to do was like hang out with my boyfriend at the time. But like there was some expectation from my family of what they wanted me to do. And there was another expectation like from a friend group. Like, no, I think you should come out with me. And all I wanted to do, which is all I ever want to do, which was just like be in my pajamas and like snuggle on the couch, right? Like that's the only thing I want to do ever for all 34 years of my life. That's all I've ever wanted to do. But anyways, so we're sitting there and I am getting like hysterical. Like I am getting really, really upset because it feels like I'm being pushed in all these directions. And I remember that my boyfriend at the time looked at me and he said, well, what do you want to do? And I had no ability.
Yeah.
I truly, like, it's not like, it's not like it wasn't a cop out, right? I wasn't like, oh, I don't know. Like I had no idea. Looking back now, I know what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to lay on the couch and do nothing. But then it was just like, I had no idea because every single thing I was doing was to make somebody else happy.
Yeah.
To receive the external validation from somebody else. Like there was never a conscious thought or even really an unconscious thought of what do I want.
Right.
It's like, I'm going to do this so I can get validation from mom, teacher, friends, peers, boyfriend, you know what I mean? Whoever. I still think I sit down sometimes when I'm like faced, with a crossroads or a hard decision and I'm like, Jill, what do you want? And it's like I look inside and I just don't know.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you. Do you think that still shows up? Because I know that I've spent a lot of my life sometimes in conflict with other people because they're asking me, like, Amber, what do you want? And I'm like, just whatever. And they get mad because they're like, could you just make a decision?
Right.
And it's not out of wanting to create that conflict or anything like that. It really is, I can't make this decision right now. I just need you to do it. Like, I need you to make the decision so I can go along with it for whatever reason. I can't dig that deep right now. And so, I mean, sometimes it comes down to, where do you want to go eat? And the amount of anxiety that comes up with having to make that decision, even now, like that comes up with that. And it all stems from that, like people pleasing and what should I be doing and what do you want and just body issues. And, it's like all of those things rise up into what do you want? And you're like, and I'm like, I don't know what I want because there are so many conflicting things going on inside my head right now that if you would just make a decision, I could be like, okay, I can go with that.
I mean, it's something I still struggle with. I think there's some of us who are really good at like making the best of a situation we've been given, right? Like if somebody picks a restaurant that we don't really like, right? Like you are smart enough, you are adaptable enough, you can go there and you can find something to eat, right? And you are like kind enough and empathetic enough that you're not going to be mad at the person for it, right? And you're going to engage. And so I'm like that too. And it's like, I am so good at being handed a pile of shit and like building it into like a shit castle. You know what I mean? Like I can take like a shitty situation and make it really good. I mean, I'm a fucking social worker for God's sakes. Like that. And so are you. Like that is literally what we're good at. But I think when you're good at that and when you're used to that, you're fine with everybody making the decision because you spin it into gold anyways. But then you never make the decision. Right. You never just choose the gold. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, it's fine. Like, not the way I would have done it, but this way I'm not on the hook for having to make the decision. Right. And I can spin it anyway.
Right. And I don't have any responsibility after the decision has been made as to whether or not everyone else is happy or whatever. I used to tell people when they would get irritated when I wouldn't make a decision, I just make decisions all day long. Like, I'm just tired of making it. I just need somebody else to make a decision for me. And I think it was a cop-out. I mean, I do make a lot of decisions, just in my job, as a leader, as a parent. You find yourself constantly having to be like, okay, we're doing this. Okay, we're doing the move in this direction, doing that. But I used to just be like, I've made too many decisions and I don't want to make any more. But I don't think that was true at all.
No, I think the answer for me is that I wasn't tapped in enough to me. I never spent any time listening to myself to even think about what I wanted. Yeah. So when somebody was like, Jill, what do you want? I'm like, we don't do that, right? Yeah. Like, we don't go there.
Yeah, I only make decisions for other people.
For other people, yes. When I went on my Jillcation in April, I was like, there's some decisions I need to make, right? About, like, my life and what I want. And, I mean, I sat there for 4 fucking days, and it took that long for me to, like, erase the chatter, to kind of be able to ground deeper, to just really get down to the core of like, who am I? What do I want? What do I want for my life? To your point, what are the feelings of what I want? And then how do I build from there?
Right.
And that took literally days.
Yeah.
To unpeel enough and to like get out of the fucking fray of everyday life enough to get there.
Yeah. I feel like that's the only way that I can get there is if I need to make a decision for myself, right? I have to ground down into like, how do I want this to feel? And I know that there are certain feelings that I want in my life. Like I'm very clear on what those are and how they feel. Sometimes it feels like a very minor decision that needs to be made. But here I am like rounding down. Okay, is this going to bring me some joy? Is this going to make me feel freer? Is it going to make me feel constricted? Going through that whole thing and then being like, okay, this feels like the right decision for me right now. Right. And then also knowing that like I can make this decision right now, and guess what? If I don't like it, I can make a different decision. Yes. Like reminding myself of that, because that's also that perfectionism, right? I'm paralyzed in making a decision because I don't want to make the wrong decision, instead of just make a decision. Any decision will do.
Yes.
And then you can just pivot later.
Yes. That is definitely a symptom of the perfectionism. Is like this belief that this pinpoint in time means everything, right? Like I can look back now on my life, and there are so many times that I made a decision or took a step that looking back, right, I was like, oh, probably not the best one, but look at me now, fucking thriving. Like, you make it, I think that's another false belief that, oh, if I fuck up this decision in this moment in time, all will be ruined. Yeah. Like, spoiler alert, you're not even going to fucking remember making this decision at this moment in time. Right. There are very few moments in my 35 years of life, well, 34 and 364 days. It is my birthday tomorrow. But no, there are very few decisions in my 35 years of life that I even remember making. Right. Just a little pro tip for me, like when I'm freaking out, right? Like when I need to stay up late and work all night and do this, or like, this, that, and the other. Like, I need to have this conversation. I need to do this. I will pause sometimes and say like, will I remember this in a week? Yeah. And 90% of the time, the answer is no. Right. I will not remember this in a week, this decision. And if the answer is yes, I'll say, well, I remember this in a month. And for sure, like 99.9% of the time, the answer is no. And I think sometimes we forget to zoom out, right? We get so caught in the muck of where we are right now that we don't zoom out and think like, I've made hard decisions like this, or I've dropped balls like these many times before. Yeah. And I have been just fucking fine. Yeah. And everybody all around me has been fine too. I think that's a huge thing. And, and we were talking about, I think 2 podcast episodes ago, of like things we let steal our peace, right? Yeah. And that's one of them for sure. Like I literally let the decision of, man, should I clear my emails tonight versus tomorrow morning? I let that steal my peace a couple times a week, which is fucking ridiculous. Because can you look back at any moment in your life, Amber, and think, man, remember when I didn't answer all those emails and it like totally changed the trajectory of my career?
Never. Never.
But how often do you obsess about that?
Yeah. Well, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about like the pivotal decisions that I have made in my life. Yes. Right? The times where I've made a decision and it has changed the trajectory. Like it's been a big one. And how often I've sat with not making that decision for months because I've been afraid to pivot. And instead, I have obsessed over these other dumb decisions and let those just kind of like take over. I'm like, let me not look at this one thing that I do absolutely need to make a decision
like literally on. Rome is burning here.
Right. And I need to make a decision. I need to act here. But let me just look at these emails. Let me just look at what we're going to have for dinner. Let me just look at, who's going to drive today, or just the dumbest things, and obsess over those instead, because why not?
Yes, I think we all do that a lot. That is often a tip to me when I am getting real rigid and fucking crazy about shit that doesn't matter. Right. The question then to myself is, Jill, like, what are you ignoring? What is on fire that you're refusing to look at? Because you've never cared about, like, meal prepping this much in your whole ass life. So, like, why are you being so crazy? Because we're trying to exercise control, right, over the things that we can. Yeah. Because there's likely something big
Yeah,
that we have lost control of.
Right. Or there's a decision that you have to make that you have control over your decision, but you don't have control over the outcome. Those are the big, normally pivotal decisions that you make. So you need to make a decision about a relationship. You need to make a decision about a job. You need to make a decision about a purchase or something financial or whatever. And so you can't see past the decision. You just know something needs to change here, right? And you don't know what it's going to look like, so you're afraid to make it. And then meanwhile, you're meal prepping and doing
yelling at everyone because the house isn't clean,
right,
and like stomping around like an absolute lunatic.
Right.
I've definitely done that. And I will say, and I know we've talked about this before, but it's been a while. Those big decisions, if you continue to ignore them and refuse to act, eventually they will act for you.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
The decision will come for you if you do not address it every single time, right? You can have a relationship that is slowly crumbling, right? That has a conversation that you need to have. And instead, again, you're focusing on how clean is the house? Who's taking the kids to school? Like, let's map out our calendar for the next 2 months. And eventually, you can ignore it all you want, but it's coming for you.
Yep.
And it will implode. And I used to be the kind of person that I would wait for every single thing to implode instead of acting on it.
Yeah.
I would walk around. I talked about this in the very first podcast. I walked around for months talking about how much I hated my job, right? And how I disagreed with what they were doing and how I didn't like it and da-da-da. Like, just stomped around for literal fucking months. As an independently licensed social worker, like, the rational thing to do would have been like, hey, this isn't working for me. So I'm going to make a decision to leave, right? Instead, I'm like, no, I'm going to hold everybody hostage and act like a fucking psycho for literal months until finally the situation came for me, right? And I do feel lucky being in a place in my life where, not always, but sometimes, I make decisions that maybe to other people feel premature, or maybe to me feel premature, to get out of situations that I'm not happy with, or to change situations that need changing. And it is like such an incredible, empowering feeling. So I just say that, and it feels really, really scary, and it feels like you're blowing your whole world up, and you're setting everything on fire, and you're letting people down. But I would just encourage people that if you do have a big decision or a big problem that you've been ignoring, acting on it is one of, like, the kindest, like, most bravest thing you can do for yourself, because it feels really, really good.
Right. Well, and it's the difference between we're going to disassemble this bridge opposed to we're going to burn this to the ground.
Exactly.
You know,
I was going to say bridge closed.
Yeah. We're just, and we're going to mutually put up our signs on both sides of the bridge and be like, we're done, right?
It was a nice bridge. It served its purpose.
Right. Opposed to, let me stomp around here until somebody sets fire to this bridge. That's a very different sentiment. And then there's always healing that has to be done after that. Then there's all of these things that come up, like, oh, well, I was rejected. And then you get past it a little while and you look and you're like, oh yeah, I played a role in that. Like, I created my own rejection. Great.
Yes.
You know? But in the moment, when you've let the bridge burn, you don't know it. So then you're like almost creating your own misery, opposed to you could have had the conversation. It could have been uncomfortable. Maybe something good would have come out of that. But you could have just had the closure from that, opposed to having to, like, live through this fire and then
have to heal from the fire and the closure.
Right.
There is still no
own.
longer a bridge, but we also now have the traumatic event of a fire. And I think, like, to bring it all the way back, we were talking earlier about, like, that inability to make a choice, right? Because that inability or unwillingness or being scared to tap into what we really want, right? And I think that's where that stems. Like, if you take the time to think about what you want. I mean, and I have literally had to sit and, like, journal and make to-do lists. Like, figuring out what you want is not as easy as being like, oh, I'm going to, like, turn out the lights and, like, light a candle and, like, sit here and think about what I want, right? Like, it's going to take intervention. It could take therapy. It could take all these things. But I truly think if you think about what you want, if you're able to tap into that, into the things that are really important to you, then you're going to feel more equipped and prepared to make those hard decisions. Because if you don't know what you want, then you're just going to stomp around and scream into the void, because you don't have the ability and the groundedness to say, like, oh, this isn't what I want, because I know what I want, so I'm going to seek something else, which means that you're just going to live a life of burned bridges. And having spent a lot of my lifetime burning bridges,
Yeah.
It's like a stressful way to be. It's just not the best way
Yeah.
to go through it, I don't think.
So what do you think, outside of the dream of perfection that we've decided to let go of over the years, is there anything that you like can think of when you were a kid that you were like, I really wanted this, and somehow you just sort of let that go, and maybe as you've gotten older you're like, I want to revisit that, or you have revisited it, like you let go of it for a period of time because it seemed childish or underdeveloped or whatever?
So I'm thinking two things, and one is like more serious than the other. The first one I'm thinking is, I think over time, like I've let go of the dream of what I think romantic love should look like. And I feel like I talked about that a ton in the episode about Bridgerton. Like I think I had this very romanticized view of what partnership and love and everything looks like, right? And I think that's part of just getting older, right? And being in relationships, like you realize life overall is like fairly mundane, which is like a cool thing and a beautiful thing, but it is what it is. So I think that is one thing that I've explored, I've let go of. I think, again, I worry less about how other people like perceive me and my relationships, right? And things like that. So that's one. And then the other one, you were just talking about like something like when you were a kid that you let go of that you didn't. I've always like joked that I'm like just not artistic enough to pursue that as a career. I really like creative stuff, like drawing, painting, knitting, you know what I mean? All of that kind of stuff. And whenever I like let myself do it, I'm just so happy. I do an art class with my friends or, you know, or something like that. And so that's something, that creative piece that I feel like I let go of, because it's like, you could never do that. Like, you know, you could never make money doing that. And to be honest, I probably could not make money doing it. I'm not that good, but I'm good enough. You know what I mean? I'm good enough that like, if you take me to like a wine and paint, like mine will be one of the best ones at wine and paint. You know what I'm saying?
I haven't quite let go of that perfection dream.
Exactly. I'm like, I'm still the best. Okay. But yeah, like, you know, like there is some talent there that I think that I always just kind of like shook off as kind of silly and frivolous and not serious or important. But then when you think about like what does bring me joy, like when do I feel happy? I love being creative like that. Even like when we do for our third wheel stuff, like, you know, we make these like little workbooks and handouts and I love that shit. So that's something that I've on and off in adulthood that I've tried to like let myself pursue that dream a little bit, even though I think a couple decades ago I was like stupid, dumb, no. So yeah. What about you?
When I was little, some of my favorite things to do, I would also draw things and paint. I would create these like books. I would sell them to my my Oma for like
I had one customer.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean that was who was in the house. So I would sell them to her, and I would, you know, like price them out for a nickel or something. And so I would make those, and then I was always setting up situations where I could teach other people. I would take my dolls or my stuffed animals, and I was the teacher, and I'd like put them all out. I was an only child up until I was 9. And then my mother and father divorced. So my siblings didn't live with me. So there was a lot of like solo play going on, you know, like there's a lot of like solo magic, pretend play. And I would do all this like teacher stuff, and I would like create all these plans, and I would like read stories to my stuffed animals and all of these things. And so, you know, I feel like there's always been like little pieces of that in the work that I've done.
Yeah.
But like when I was little, I was like, gung-ho, I was going to be a teacher, right? Yeah. And then I realized like, as I got older, I was like, I just don't think that's probably where I want to be. But I do feel like as I get older, more of those pieces are pulling back into my life where I'm doing more of that teaching, but just not in that school teacher traditional kind of way. And then also the creative piece of it, not so much of drawing and things like that. Though I do that sometimes. I mean, again, I also am not like a super fantastic artist, but I'll create things and I'll have them in my home, stuff like that. But then the writing piece of it, I've gotten back to that through writing trainings, and I journal and all of that. So I do feel like I'm kind of coming back into it. I'm reading more, which is something I also used to do a lot as a kid, and really fueled some of that creativity and imagination type things. So, yeah, I think that there were dreams that I kind of let go of for a period of time and have started to reclaim them in more adult ways than, I had seen them when I was a kid. And the funny thing, you were talking about relationships and dreams around that. And I thought about when I was a kid, and I don't know, did you dream of how relationships were going to be when you were a kid? Was that a central focus for you? I want to be this kind of bride and this kind of...
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't.
Interesting.
I didn't. I thought about relationships and that I did want to be in a relationship. I would hear about that from other little girls. There was all of this weird wedding planning going on, at 10. And I was like, oh, I don't know about that, but sounds nice. But I had Barbies, okay? I played Barbies. I don't know how old I was when the Barbies finally went away, but literally had an entire playroom of Barbies and Barbie houses and Barbie cars and Barbie everything.
Yeah.
And I remember, I was always playing with them, and I was kind of setting them up in ways that this is the perfect way the relationship goes. They're dressed in a certain way. This is the way their house looks. This is the way that they get in the car and they go to the store together, and then they have the babies and the dogs and all the weird Barbie things. And as you were talking, I was thinking that was my picture. Yes. That was my picture of relationship, was just we just need to lay everything out in perfect order.
Right. It doesn't matter how we feel. It just matters what it looks like. It matters what it looks like.
Yeah, there was no feeling. Yep. There was only action in the Barbie. I don't know. I guess they kind of fought and stuff. But I think about it now and I'm there was no depth of feeling there. There was no, these two people love each other, or... No. And it was no, this is the Ken and the Barbie and they go together.
And they're busy. They're busy doing life things. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I think that really, I don't want to say informed, but it kind of shows how my early relationships were, where it was just this is what you do.
And right? I think people who are good at executing, who are high performers, right? Mm-hmm. If you are a high performer, at least the way that I do it, you look at things like to-do lists, right?
Right.
You look at things like checklists, right? Mm-hmm. You break it down into measurable goals and steps, and you knock them out, right? And it's marriage equals Ken plus Barbie plus a nice clean house plus a nice car plus doing X, Y, and Z errands. And I think that's literally how I was, both with romantic love, friendships, work, everything. It's this is what it looked, here is the formula, right? So if I follow said formula and I get all the X's and the Y's and the things that I need to do that, then that should equal happiness.
Right.
And I think that has always been a hard thing for me, is I have had many points in my life where I, seemingly from the outside, have completed the formula.
Right.
I have the man, I have the job, I have, the money I need, I have, I have everything, and everybody would look at me and be like, man, Jill has checked all the boxes. And I will tell you, those are the moments in my life where I have experienced typically my worst depressive episodes. Because I think I fulfill the formula, and it's the universe told me now I should be happy and fulfilled.
Right.
And I'm not.
Really, Mattel told you. But, whatever.
Yeah. Thanks, Mattel. Jeez. But truly, and so I wonder if that's part of it. It's and I think that's part of the getting older. And that's kind of what I was talking about, and what I've changed. What I think about romantic love is because it's more about how do I feel, right? Do I feel safe? Do I feel secure? Do I feel cared for? Do I feel I have the space and ability to care for somebody else, right? Can I engage in that connection and communication with someone? And I'm less worried about how are we presenting in the world to everybody else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that even with the Barbie thing, how I grew up, my parents were divorced, but they were both remarried. And I'm sorry if you're listening, if my parents are listening, but, the way that I saw those relationships was almost transactional.
Yeah.
I knew that they loved each other. They said they loved each other, but there wasn't a lot of affection. It was almost held for certain times. So it wasn't always, and I think that also informs, we just do the things. Like, as long as we're doing the things.
We're just plodding along.
Right? Mm-hmm. And it's cool if we fight and scream at each other because we're just going to keep doing the things. We don't have to regulate our emotions. We can just blow up and then move on. That's the expectation. So those were hard realizations for me as I got older and was in different relationships with different people. Because, everybody brings their own relationship stuff with them too. So, some people are down with that. Some people showed up in my life that also had those same things going on. So like, certainly we can sit here and scream at each other. Cool. But just coming to the realization that like that really isn't what you want.
Right. And I do think some of that is generational too. And we have to think about just like the world is different, right? Like, 30, 40, 50 years ago, women and just people in general didn't have the options and abilities that they have now, right? Like you really had to be partnered, especially as a woman, to like not actively starve to death, right? And like to, have property and a home and things like that. And I think it used to be more transactional. I mean, think about even just like the way we think about, and I'm not going to get up on my soapbox about like legal marriage and shit like that, but there is a transactional piece to it.
Right.
And some of that is just life, right? And we are going to be transactional with all different types of people in our lives. But I think particularly with the people closest to us, whether it's our children, our best friends, our partners, our parents, like trying to dig a little deeper past that transactional piece,
Yeah.
And like we are, for some reason that I believe is meant to be, like we are walking this path together right now. So I imagine there is more to it than like just pooling our income so we can make our mortgage, you know, and how do we figure out what that really is?
Right.
Dreams.
Yeah.
Perfectionism. All this stuff. All the hard stuff. I think that was a good one. Pull a card for us. What else does the universe want to tell us? They wanted us to talk about this.
Okay.
And now what else do we need to know today?
All right. Let's all take a deep breath together. And set the intention that we're going to receive exactly what we need from this card pull and from this episode today. And that maybe we look a little bit deeper into some of our dreams and the ones that we've let go for good reason, and the ones that we've let go that maybe we want to revisit. Oh, look. We have the Mother of Water, and she is about emotional self-care. And so I think that kind of plays in with what we're talking about with the dreams and what dreams we've had to let go of, and how hard it is sometimes to maybe let go of certain dreams that we've had and to transition through that and see what is really best for us on the other side of that, and needing to have that emotional self-care in place so that we can move through those times. And this card says, take care of you. You are forgetting yourself. So when we're looking at the dreams that maybe we used to have that we've set aside, or the dreams that have been assigned to us, right? Let's not forget ourselves. Let's not forget our own dreams, and make sure that those are the dreams that we're actually pursuing, opposed to the dreams that have been prescribed to us by society or by someone else. Cool. And the declaration is, I am filled with the power of love.
I love it. Let us not forget ourselves this week.
Absolutely.
If nothing else. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Guided by Third Wheel, the podcast. We would be honored if you would like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, be well.